Yep. An ape in a jungle? You hear the jungle sounds, right? Yeah, we're in a jungle. The bots are playing a game that we made. We like to make games. This is a game that you can play. We enjoy it when people can play our games. That's why we make them. There's another game we're making called Shuffle Wars. It's a battle card game. We're doing some art for it. There's another game we're making. And here's, a friend asked yesterday, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm, streaming some games like Fortnite and Skyrim, and streaming a game we're making a game. And they said, you're making a game while you stream? And I said, well, yeah. And I know this friend understands long, involved technical processes. She's done them before. I know she knows this. But I was running into the problem, the myth about the designer, and it's tied in with the myth of what games are. I said game, and here she was playing a game, and it's like a nice looking, cool game. And so when I said we're making a game on stream, she's imagining somehow I am magically putting together something on the order of Skyrim or Fortnite on stream. And it's like, well, no. And what we've been showing on this series Design Chat and on the other series Design Workshop is that those games are made with a series of small steps. In fact, Fortnite and Skyrim are made with hundreds of people who aren't learning the process. They are good at the process. They're professionals. And they work for years on this. So, imagine I said, yeah, I'm building the pyramids of Egypt. I said, wow, you're building the pyramids of Egypt on stream? I'm not building an entire pyramid, in an hour. I am taking a small step. We have been working on a game that was really simple and small, and this early design did happen in an hour. We said, it's not hard. Anyone can do this. Let's just pretend the player is a square. We have to give them a modest amount of player control. Like they can move around left and right, sure. Up and down, okay. And then we have to give them something to do. But this satisfies one of three really key components to make it a game. We said we can design a game. We can do this. This is one of the three. Let's keep going. And this is, that took me 5 seconds to sketch out. See, the whole thing that my friend didn't quite get was I was talking about a very simple game. I was talking about a design that can happen on paper like this first that's really easy to do quickly. When I said I was streaming making a game, what she didn't realize was I was talking about just one step at a time. Another step is that our player character can go into a win square and win. So we kind of have half of a game right here. If they can get in the win square, they win. But the win square will shrink over time. And if they don't get there in time, then the win square goes away and they can't win. In fact, we just trigger that they lost the game. And that's the whole game. As long as the player understands these rules and we have a win and lose condition and the player has a modest amount of player control, Done. That's a game. This is a game. So while my friend was thinking, wow, you're doing a game on stream, and she was thinking about like a big game like Skyrim or Fortnite or Valorant or Marvel Rivals. Like, no. No. Although those are games too. A game can be a simple thing. And we've talked about this. Flip a coin, pick a number, right? Tic-tac-toe, tag. These are games, and they're very simple. That said, we have gone a little further, because this early design, we've spent time on it, step by step, hour by hour. Last time, we said, well, we've got this game. Here it is. And we've already looked at, can we make this more interesting? Can we make this better? And just the player movement alone has gone through a couple of iterations. In other words, we've revisited it and revised and improved it. Just the player control part of it, right? Just this part. Because now, what we realized was when we just do left, up, down, left, right, the player actually feels like they want this, and it became a player need. We should be able to go diagonal too. And this square is kind of meh. Can we do something better, like, make it look like something? A cute something, right? So, yeah, this has already gone through some iteration. And last time on Design Chat, we said, okay, but while the player control is looking good, the character animation is a mess. It was looking right, but it's going to be more difficult to revise and always improve, as we can expect to do with our design process. It's going to be difficult if this is a mess. So let's go in, keep the functionality exactly the same, and do what is called refactor. We did this in Design Chat first because we looked at the rules that we had and realized where some of this was, frankly, redundant or contradictory or just poorly fit together, and we realized some opportunities we could use to make it simpler. And then in Design Workshop, we did. In Design Workshop, we said, this looks right. If I hit play, and we look at this test of our little guy, I can move to the left and to the right. This looks right. If I move up and down, this looks right. If I have gone left and then I go up and down, he looks a little different, and this is exactly what we want to see. He can move diagonal too. The movement is good. This functionality looks great. And we said, and under the hood, it's a mess. So we spent some time knowing that we expect to improve this code. This is the code that does the movement. That was pretty good. It's on our character right here. This one right here. And so when we hit play, we can see the direction change because we are moving around. And there's a speed too. In fact, can we change the speed? Sure, we can totally do that if we want. Oh, he's moving so fast now. Well, cool. But this one was a mess under the hood. This one had a lot of issues. And there were some things that were unnecessary, and we cleaned it up. In other words, this script was okay. We actually cleaned this up a little bit. But this is the one that was a mess, and we cleaned it up a lot. In the end, we kind of decided there is something we were using, like a state machine. We were talking about states, like the character is idle right now, and the character is going up or down or whatever. And in these states, they will follow different rules, like blink every once in a while. Well, in the future, this may be true. If you've ever played Sonic the Hedgehog, that classic game, that classic platformer, when he's idle, there's a timer, and after a while of you not doing a thing, he will look at you, he will tap his foot, he will get impatient. He will visibly become impatient. In other words, a separate set of animations play during this idle state. Those are rules that happen in this idle state for Sonic the Hedgehog. In the future, we may do something with this. But after our refactor, we decided, wow, this is actually not even necessary right now. We thought it was, and that's okay to change our mind. And I'm going to leave it here because we might change it again. But for now, in order to make this code simpler, we found a way to do that. This is the stuff our script remembers, and then our script begins to do something at start and continues to do something every single frame on update. So we used to do this get move state stuff and work with it. We don't really do it anymore. I've commented that out because we don't really need it. This is the simpler set of rules we decided is all we need to have the same functionality. And we tested as we went, so yeah, this actually works pretty well. It's smaller, but it's also a little bit easier to read and a little bit easier to understand. We made some changes, and we made that, this stayed the same. We made those changes with the idea that in the future we were going to revise this more and change it more. It should not be difficult to do that. It should be easier to do that if we make these changes now. This changed slightly with our main idea that we are now having this script look at move script and look at those numbers for the direction. It's actually the main change. So this is good because we're not only following the best practice of the design process, where we look for opportunities and we take the best idea and test it, and then evaluate the test and to see if there's new insight about what the player might need. And we're also using that process to realize that in the future, this means we're going to continue to potentially change what we have and improve. So we did a smart thing. We cleaned this up now, anticipating we may change this in the future. And even though this is a test, it's a prototype of what our character movement and animation should be doing together, we'll use it in our game once we're ready to go. Right now, the game scene and the prototype scene look the same because they both have this character with both of these scripts on it. And these scripts act exactly the same way. And let's test that theory. If I go into the game scene and do this, yep, cool. So what do we have when we're looking at this move prototype? And notice I can switch scenes by just double-clicking on the scene. This is a test scene, a prototype scene. We're using this to find the problems and opportunities to make this better. And now we have a pretty good animation script and a move script. These two features for the character move and character animation, they work pretty well. We could now think about what are some of the other things that work with this feature, and what are the other main features of our game, and those could be separate prototypes. For example, we have a wind square. This wind square is meant to shrink over time. If this character is looking pretty good, cool. This is a character that represents our modest amount of player control, part of our game. But also it's going to be the thing that determines if they win when this gets inside this square. If they can get there before the wind square disappears, they win. So they kind of have to get there. That's part of the equation there, right? The win square is going to determine if they win, because it will interact with our character, and it will determine if they lose, because it has not interacted with the character, and it has completely disappeared. The time limit has gone by. Well, then, yeah, they lose. So when we looked at the rules of this, we determined, actually, yeah, this win square actually has a lot of rules in it. We want it to shrink to visibly show the passage of time, and that there is a time limit. If you get in here, you win, but if it disappears, you can't, and that would be visibly apparent if this shrunk. So we're going to have this shrinking. It is also based on this time, so there is a timer involved in that. What else? Probably needs to say when, but that's relatively straightforward, I think. We'll see. At first, we just said, give me a square, give me another square. That'll satisfy the minimum requirements to make it a game. Go. And already we said, well, let's maybe not make the player a square. Let's make them a little bit more like a character. That'll be better. So we've already begun to revise based on what we think the player might need. This could also change. We could also say maybe a square for the win thing is not so great. I think the time limit and getting inside before the time limit satisfies win and lose well enough, though. So I don't know we want to change that as much, right? We want to keep the minimum requirements for the game. Cool? But I think it's time we say, this is looking pretty good. Our character, the look of it, with the art, because we actually put art on this thing, and movement is looking pretty good. It is a modest amount of player control, check. But also, we're satisfying some of those things, like what a player asks, who am I? The little character looks up at them and says, me, I'm you. Right? It's good. So we can, for now, call this done. We can come back to it later. This is still our best idea so far, implemented in a plan so that we can test it. That's exactly what this test scene is. Well, let's make a new test scene. Let's make a new test scene and see what we can do with this, where, in fact, I'm wondering if I should copy it or if I should just make a new scene. What I'm going to do is save as. No, I kind of like the background and everything we have going on here. The sample scene has that background that looks like a sky. The game scene and this other scene have this other thing. So you know what I'll do? I'll copy the... I'm going to save this game scene as. So I'm going to make a new prototype scene for our win square. And I think we need to decide if win square is a good enough name for it. But I'll call it in the prototype folder. Excuse me. There. In the prototype folder, which is right here, I will call it, I'll call it win square, because it is still a test and we don't know, but it is a prototype for sure. So we'll call it win square prototype. That's fine. Okay. So right now the win square prototype looks exactly the same. It's fine. I might just turn this off for now. Turn off the character. I don't need to delete it, but I do want to focus us on something else. What is that something else? Well, let's just do it. We need a new object, and like our player character, it's going to have a quad on it. So we want to find this. Actually, you know what? Let's just make a quad. That's easy. I mean, we could always create an empty and put those components on it. That's true. But I'm just going to make a quad. There we go. I will call it the win square, because who knows what we should call it. I think the player might understand it if we call it win for now. I don't know. I'm going to put it at the world origin just like the character was. All we really need to do is figure out how this should move. Mesh collider. Do we need a collider? I don't know. You know, there is this thing where we need to interact between these two. We might use a collider later. But for now, we should keep this a quad. That's fine because we're calling it the win square. We will ignore these other properties, although I have to be honest, some of these are totally unnecessary. We can get rid of them. But for now, let's make a new material for our win square. Let's call it a prop. Sure. I mean, it is the goal, but I'm going to right click here and say create new material. Yeah. All right. I will name this win. Well, I'll just call it win square. I don't know what else to call it at this point because we've been calling it win square the whole time. Our character has this unlit material that can show clear or transparency. I don't mind trying that out. We'll see if we need to change it, but you know, I don't really have anything else for it right now. Actually, what I would like is for us to color it. Do we have color? Yes, we do. Well, all right. We would just color this. I mean, it's a square. There's no reason to have it transparent yet, right? Again, if we want to change that, we can, but, well, what color do we want? One might think green is a good place to go. I mean, yes. By the way, we can talk about color some other time, but red, green, and blue makes up additive color. That's why red and green and blue are here. If you're thinking, wait, don't you use yellow? Well, actually, in light, you make yellow. Instead of making green, you make yellow. It's interesting. But also, hue, saturation, and value is another way to describe the same stuff. This hue is the spectrum, and then how much color is saturation, and value is brightness. So I'm just going to find a color hue that is green-like. That's pretty green. And I'll just go ahead and say 100% saturation and maybe not 100% value, but enough. In fact, Vinacci is my friend. Okay, let's do that. Is that too dark? I don't know. I can apply this material to this object with our friend here, this little space, and drag it and drop it in there. I can also do this and throw it on the object like this. It's the same thing. Same thing. So, cool. It's just a material with color. That's all it is. Unlit color. In fact, we could also mess with the transparency on this, could we not? No. Is there unlit color transparent? No. Interesting. Well, to be honest, I made a shader that was unlit with texture and color. In fact, all those characters you see down below can flash and stuff because of that. They can turn blue during the ice wave spell because of that. So, right. Let's go back to unlit color, and we'll just stay there for now. Because it doesn't need to do anything fancy right now. It just needs to look like a square. And I guess more than that, it needs to look like a bigger square because, as we said in our little diagram here, it's going to shrink, and our character's going to try and get there. Let's try, so we've got a square, and we can try making it big and then having it shrink. We can have it try to disappear at some point when it's so small, and we could have it tell us somehow that they lost because it's gone. So make it big and then shrink and then say you lost. That's one part of what we need to do. The other part is the win, which is going to require some interaction between these two. So that's a separate thing. We'll figure it out, yeah? This one, making it big and making it shrink, sounds relatively straightforward. Or at least it's a separate thing we can try now. So, a script? Yes, you probably need a script. Let's make a script for this prop. We will call it, well, I'm going to right click here, say create, I'm going to say script. And we will call it win square. Wow, everything's called win square. I guess we could separate the features. I'm going to call it win square for a second. Whoops, hello, thank you. Here's what I want to say. Here I am stopping to like figure out what is the name of this script. But what I'm really doing is a design question. I'm saying, hold on, what are the features of this thing? And should they be separate features? It takes a while to recognize, are these one big feature we call the win square, and they belong on one script that will handle all of it? Or is this actually going to be split up into several things where this thing, like, this one shrinks it, and this one determines if you win, and this one determines if you lose? I mean, what's the division here? Like, should one thing do it all? Or should we split it up? It takes some experience to really get a better handle on this. And again, the best way to learn this is to just do it and try it and learn as you go. And to be fair, you never know. When we're making games, we're always making something brand new. We're always making something brand new. No one's ever made this. So relax. Because nobody has the answer for this. There is no correct answer for this. This is something you can find your way, which is why the design process works so well. You are free and allowed to change your mind when you need to. In this case, we're going to try and make it shrink with this script. And if it starts to get silly, like we can try and do this lose too. And if it starts to be a lot, we'll just say this is the win square shrink script. We'll actually rename it. And then we'll make another script for win. We could do that. It does take some time to sort of get a feel for like how much of this is one feature and how much of this is like several features put together. If you describe Skyrim and you say, I went to the College of Winterhold to learn magic, you could say, well, yeah, Skyrim has a magic system. Is there one script that handles all of the spells and things that happen with magic in Skyrim? Oh, heck no. I'm positive no. I'm positive this branch would go on forever. It's really big. There's a lot of spells, first of all, but also there's scrolls and there's different interactions and spells. There's leveling up with spells. I mean, it just goes on and on. There's NPCs that do spells, which is different than when players do spells. I mean, it just goes on and on. Again, they did that with small steps over a long period of time with lots of people. For us, Thank goodness we started with a simple game, and half of it looks like it's done. Or it looks good enough for now, right? For us, we can say, okay, we really just need to tackle this win square. If we focus on the win and lose condition, we're good. Part of that is the shrinking, so let's get shrink and lose together. And then we'll work on win. So let's go. I'm going to call this the win square for right now. Like I did before with these other scripts, I am going to make it look like the other scripts first, and you'll bear with me. My obsessive compulsiveness wants me to make it the same, and I do want to do that. Yeah. Did I do that from memory? Yes, I did. Oh, system collections and system collections generic. All right, then. So what are these? It's a little early to talk about that. But people wrote code before us to make the Unity engine work and to let to let C# work with the Unity engine. And all that code that they wrote is in here. All of it. What's this then? Well, it's a whole bunch of other code that other people wrote for other things besides the Unity engine, but that you can use in the Unity engine. Okay. Do I need it here? No, I'm totally just being OCD, but it's okay. The only other thing I wanted to do was just make this look the same because I just can't handle this very long-winded thing. There, done. Okay. This looks the same. As we did with our other script, I'm going to begin by explaining who wrote this script and what it's supposed to do. This may seem like, wait, but these comments don't do anything. It's not code. You can, it's just notes. So why spend the time on this busy work? Well, I'll tell you. Good question. It's because this pattern you get into, this rhythm you get into, this reflexive habit you get into is a good one. It's a best practice. When multiple programmers work together and there's one who doesn't do this, their code sticks out, first of all, as who wrote this and what's going on with it and what am I supposed to, people start complaining. But when you do this, people know who to talk to. Hey, did you work on the Win Square script? Let me talk to you about it. This shrinks the Win Square and determines game loss. Just a brief description. You read it, you get the idea of what the script is supposed to do, done. I basically summarized a feature or a sub-feature of this thing. There's another best practice. Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing code on the design chat. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. So, this is going to be silly because it looks like I'm in code, but I'm just doing these 2 slashes. So I'm really not doing code. I'm doing notes. I can type whatever I want here in this. I can type whatever I want in here. If you type 3 slashes, that thing happens. So these are just notes. I'm not actually typing code. Relax. These are literally notes for us for later. It's the same as this, except I don't need to switch over to GIMP. We could start here if you like. If you feel better with this, we can do this. That's totally fine. Hey, what are the rules about this Win Square shrinking to the loss state? Right? We're going to shrink and we're going to lose. How do we do that? What are the rules for that? Again, stick with our format. If this condition is true, then do that. what do we do here? Right? What are the rules that we need to follow to make this happen reliably, consistently, and work the way we want for our player experience? Well, let's see. The win square should do stuff like shrink, but actually there's a time when it shouldn't shrink, right? I think that's true. The condition is what I'm thinking of right now. The win square does shrink when the game is running. Now, I say that very carefully because I want to say if the game is running. Meaning, there's a time when the game's not running, like the beginning of the level, and we say level 1 or something like that, right? Or the end of the game, like, hey, you won. And so we should stop the thing from shrinking. We should stop the game from running. So if the game is running, then shrink. Win square. Okay? That's a good rule. And what it does, by making sure the condition is in there, we have something we're implying something else, actually. That there's a time when the game is not running. We hadn't thought about that till just now. And we're also saving it from, like, losing after the player wins, right? Because we can say, you win, and so stop running. In fact, that has to be one of the rules for when you win. Has to be. Right? When you win, stop shrinking. Stop the game from running. In fact, we'll tell the player character, look happy because you won and all that stuff. We haven't done that part with this animation yet. If the game is running, shrink the square. There's probably a speed involved in that. Amount of shrink. We don't know what that is. Some amount of size per second. Something. It's a speed. And, most basic is if square is, I guess, 0 scale. Hold on. I was going to say, if the square is, like, totally disappeared, then they lose, right? So let's say loss, right? Game, loss, right? End game, right? So we stop the game from running. And loss, right? End game, loss. Cool. Okay, that's actually a much cleaner way to talk about what this rule is. We definitely want to lose the game when it's all done shrinking or when it's all gone, but we're also going to end the game so it's no longer running, okay? But check, I'm stuck on this condition, actually. If the square is what? Right? If it's shrunk all the way. Well, do you really mean like it could still be a little tiny bit of square and our player is like this big next to it and they can still win? I think not. I don't think they can win. If the win square is this small, right? Smaller than the player character. Visually, I'm questioning if they can fit inside, right? I don't think they can. I think you have to get inside the win square. I think you literally have to be inside it. Get inside it, right? So I think, actually, this condition, you lose if it gets any smaller than this. Man, it could even be something fancy, like it starts big, goes small, gets to this size, big enough to fit in, and then stays there for a second before disappearing or something like that. This would be unfair. It would feel totally unfair if it was still shrinking and you thought, well, it's right there. I could just try and get inside, but you can't. That would feel unfair. I want it to be like here, this size, the size of the player, and I say I want because I'm role-playing as the player. I as the player need it to be logical that I could fit in there to win, but if it's gone, I can't. And if it's small, this is feeling completely unfair, so I really can't have that. As a player, I say no. This is no. I think this is yes. I think we need to shrink and get to this size, and maybe that's all, but maybe even hang out for a little bit before it disappears. Like give you one last chance to get in there. This is yes. In other words, if the square is less than player size, if the square is less than player size, then you lose. In other words, it will never get to this. You'll have already lost. And in fact, we're going to say lose, and you won't be able to get in. We're going to stop it from shrinking. The game will stop, and so it can't get any smaller. It will never get here. I think that also means that if it got to that size, here's the win square, here's the player. It just has to get like 1 pixel smaller or something. And then this has to just disappear. Like this feels unfair, and so I just don't want that. This just has to go poof. This literally has to disappear. Maybe flash first or something so it's a bit more dramatic, but I need it to go away. In fact, if we have some kind of cool effect at the end, I mean, not right now, but at some point, where it was a square, but then goes poof, like this. You know, maybe it explodes. You know, something that is like, very obviously you can't get inside of it anymore. It has totally changed. It is no longer the same win square. Okay. Okay, this rule still works though. If the square is less than the player size, we lose the game. I would also argue this thing needs to disappear. So I'm adding to the results, same condition, just 2 results, not just 1. So let's see if we can do that. I guess we need to remember whether or not the game is running. In fact, if we aren't running when the level starts, it needs to sit there saying, no, we're not running. And then it needs to somehow start running. Ooh. Okay. If level starts, yes, there's more rules. If level starts, game is not running. Oh, this tablet. Game is not running. Okay. And that's 1 rule. And if 2 seconds, I'm just saying there's a timer involved. If 2 seconds after level start, okay, this might be a shorthand and we might need to expand this rule, but after level starts, then game running. And that way, game can be running or not running, and it can start not running. And this is all part of the rule set. In fact, it's all part of this win square, too. I think that's appropriate. So, wow, 4 rules. But we're implying a couple of things, like a timer for 2 seconds. We're implying that it remembers whether or not we're running. Okay, we are going to make it disappear. We should also get it to tell us that we lost. So right now it's not the win square, it's the loss square, but that's okay. Let's go with this. I am going to write down the notes that we just wrote down. Literally, I'm just doing comments. I'm not doing code. These are notes. Code comments are notes, and I'm just going to write down if level starts. Game is not running. Does that sound familiar? Because that's exactly what I just wrote. What was the next one? If 2 seconds after level starts, game is running. So this is the same format, right? I could say then if you want. Yeah, let's just be strict about it. Then, right? That's the format. If condition, then results, right? That's the format. What else? If game running, right? That's the condition. Then win square shrinks. And you'll excuse me for just a second. I have a blaring amount of static in my ear. Okay. I've realized now it's these headphones that I need to replace, apparently. That's happened in the middle of a Fortnite game, and it's been really frustrating. Literally the end game. And then I'm effectively deaf. It's crazy. Okay. So, what were the other rules? There's just one more. It is... Yeah, we want to remember a speed of that shrinking, by the way. Okay. And then if the square is less than the size of the player, okay, that's the condition. The result is end the game with a loss plus the square disappears. There's actually 3 things going on there. Oof. Okay, let's go ahead and write that down. The square will shrink at some speed. Now, if square is less than size of player. That's the condition, and then there's lots of things that happen. You'll excuse me if I organize it by putting it down here like this. First, game is not running, or end game. End the game, yes. Also, signal game loss, because that was part of it. If the win square is gone, then we lose, right? And the other part of the rule was make square disappear. And again, all 3 of these things happen because the square is less than the size of the player. So let's go ahead and call it if the level starts. Well, this is going to happen when the level starts. The game is not running. Okay, cool. If it's 2 seconds after the level starts, okay, then the game is running. Okay. Otherwise, if it's not, then we just ignore that one. And if the game is running, no, the game's not running yet. And if the square is less than, no, it's bigger than. So we ignore all these. In the beginning of the game, we really just pay attention to the first rule. After a couple of seconds, then it's no longer this rule. It's this rule we can pay attention to. Now the game is running. We can say the game starts running. That might be better. Just to be clear that we're not going to continually set it to be running after 2 seconds, because that would interfere with this rule. But it's running. It's after 2 seconds. We can ignore these 2 rules. Let's just focus on this one. it is shrinking at some speed. Okay. And we can continue to shrink while we check this. As soon as it gets less than the size of the player, we will stop shrinking because it will no longer be running. That's what this says. It will also signal a game loss, and it will also disappear. I think that'll work right. I think that'll feel like, okay, I'm looking over here, and oh, I lost. It's gone. It was just smaller than me, and the game stopped. Actually, that feels about right. This is a set of rules we just sort of sketched out here. This is faster doing it here than it is to develop it and code and playtest it and blah, blah, blah. We did follow this format. It continues to serve us really well to be very strict and follow a format for our game rules. The game rules are the only thing the game designer has in their total control. The rest is with the help of everyone else. In fact, this is what we have. We're in charge of the game rules. So we follow this strict format, and we come up with this set of rules, and it looks okay right now. Right now, this system, this set of rules, seems to handle both the loss state of our game and the shrinking or time element of our win, especially when you consider there is a speed of this shrinking. Cool. So we think this set of rules might work pretty well. We could always revise it later if it turns out that it's not right. But we followed the design process. We said, what does the player need? And we said, well, we need a lose state. We need to indicate to the player that this is a time limit, so we're going to shrink to do that. And so now when we analyze what that rule set might look like, we say, well, we need to shrink. And then when it gets too small, we will stop. And we realized, oh, there's some details to that. And we also realized, well, wait, there's a time when we're not shrinking. It's when the game isn't running. And in fact, while the game isn't running, we also kind of want to prevent the player from moving, right? Imagine they can jump in the win square before the game even starts, right? So even just on paper here, this rapid prototyping effort on our design part, we can be helping our design workshop programmer selves work out what we need to do, because, yeah, we put those notes straight into the code. It's right here. These are the same notes. They are the rules. And when we go to implement one at a time and test as we go, which we will do in Design Workshop, we will refer to the rules and we will check to see if our code is doing what the rule says. If so, we move on. And step by step, little steps, we will get there. And then we'll have all of this done. It's going to happen. And then we can just focus on the next piece, this win condition. Cool. This is a small step. When it's a small step, when we focus on a small piece, it becomes a lot easier. Could we have known that we couldn't shrink it down below the size of the player? Could we have known that ahead of time? Maybe. But why stress about that? Like, why make that an imperative that we know it ahead of time? That's the myth of the designer, isn't it? Yes, it is. Instead, let's just find our way. And to do it carefully, let's focus. Let's split it up into small pieces and try to do small pieces. If this list started to balloon into something really big, which I think we did go through some of the rules of the win square and found it was kind of huge, then maybe we need to split it up. Maybe it's appropriate that we only do shrink and loss together. That'll take care of a lot of the things the win square is supposed to do, And maybe the rest will be much easier then, yeah? Could we have seen that shrinking this too small was bad? Not really, not till we really focused on it. Not till we really detailed these rules like this. In fact, I would assert it is a best practice to be here on paper, thinking about this in paper prototyping like this first, such that you can see these issues ahead of time and zero in exactly on the rules that will work best for now. You may come back and revise these. We certainly did with our player controller. But for now, we actually found some problems we were going to head off right away. These rules are already developed pretty well. And they're ready for code now. Now, if you're saying that's not code, you just typed. It's like, well, that is code. And honestly, we are going to follow this step by step, one line at a time. We're going to do code to do this, and we're going to move on. And these notes are going to be our roadmap to get it done one step at a time. So, yeah, this is design. And this totally helps the programming effort, just like our thoughts about the player controller totally helped with the art effort to make the frames of the character. This is what a designer does to help the rest of the team so that we can all provide a good experience for the player. Enough said? We good? All right. What's up, bots? We take over the just chatting category specifically to talk about design. And what we get out of that is the opportunity to focus on best practices of design, like rapid prototyping. Yeah. Oh. Did my avatar stop working? Sorry about that. Apparently my microphone's been working the whole time, but my avatar stopped. Oops. Sorry about that. Silly me. I'm a clown. Alright. Well, aside from the avatar being totally frozen the whole time, this has been an ape in a jungle, walking with you step by step to make a game in little bits. And it's not a very complicated game, but as we found, even doing a small game can be a tricky thing. The jungle can be tricky. If you like this idea of making games as well as playing games with a cartoon ape in a jungle, then follow and be notified. And when you do show up, please do me a favor and do Command Tie. Command Tie lets me know you're here, and I can say you are here. Until then, have fun, do well, be good, stay safe, Happy New Year.